Hey guys, in this video we're going to take a look at CSS variables, or the official name for them, which are CSS custom properties. So in the past we've used CSS preprocessors like Sass and Less to handle dynamic values or variables in our CSS, but now we can do it natively. Now one question that probably comes to mind is there still a need for preprocessors like Sass? And that's something that's going to be very opinionated and something that comes down to preference. As you'll see, the native custom property syntax is pretty weird and it takes a little time to get used to, but then again it's native, it doesn't have to be compiled, you can access them from JavaScript. But then again, even though it's supported on all modern browsers except IE, what about the people with outdated browsers or the people that are using IE? You'll probably want to provide fallbacks for them. With Sass, variables are just compiled down to regular CSS, and you don't have to worry about that. So it's up to you to weigh the pros and cons. And of course, preprocessors like Sass do other things as well, not just variables. If you ask my opinion, I think that within time there's not going to be much need for preprocessors, but that won't be for at least a couple years, in my opinion. I think CSS is advancing. There's a lot of things that are coming out that are really cool. So that's just my opinion. But in this video, we're going to look at how to use variables in CSS, and we'll even jump into some JavaScript, and I'll show you how we can access the values from there. We're going to create this little mini layout, nothing special. Now, I could show you how to use a CSS variable in 3 minutes, but you know, I want to go in and I want to create a little layout. We're going to use a little bit of the grid system. So it's not just, hey, this is how you use a variable. We're going to do some other stuff as well and talk about the scoping of the variables and so on. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Coding Dojo is a programming school that turns beginners into developers in only 14 weeks. Over 90% of their grads land jobs within 3 months of graduating, often making over $70K per year. To learn more, visit codingdojo.com or click the link in the description below. Alright guys, so what I've done here is I have an index.html file and a blank style.css file. Okay, so I've removed all the styling from the markup, and the markup is very simple. It's just basically a header, okay, with an ID. It has an h1, and then we have a container class. Inside the container we have a grid class, and then we have 2 boxes with an h1 and a paragraph. So I didn't want to take the time to type this out because it's so basic. You guys can type it out quickly, or you can just get it from the Codepen in the description. Alright, so let's go over to style.css and let's start to work with variables. So when we define a variable, we can define them on different elements or different scopes. So what I want to do first is define variables for, we'll say for the root element. So to do that, we use :root. Okay, so anything that we put in here, any variables we define in here, we'll be able to use throughout all of the elements, throughout all the scope of the CSS. So let's go ahead and define just a main background color. Now to define a variable, you want to use --, and I know that's a weird looking syntax for variables. If you're used to Sass, then you're used to like a money sign, or less, I believe, is a number sign. --, is kind of weird, and it takes a little bit of getting used to. But we're going to go ahead and create main bg color, and then we're going to define that as F4 3 times, which is a light gray. Okay, so that defines the variable. Obviously it doesn't do anything yet because we haven't used it for anything, but it defines it. So let's go down to the body, and to use that variable, what we want to do is, let's say we want to use it for our background, or we'll say background color, and to use it, this is also kind of weird, we actually have to say var, open some parentheses, and then put the variable inside there. Now if you're using VS Code, you'll have this nice IntelliSense where you get this drop down and you can just select your variables. So let's save that, and now you'll see we have a gray background. So this is essentially how to use variables. Okay, I could end the tutorial here, but I want to go a little more in depth. Alright, so let's create a couple other variables in the root. So let's also do a main text color, and we'll set that to 333, which is a really dark gray. And we could go down here and say color var main text color, and save. It makes the color a little lighter. And for the body, I also want to add the font family. Now it's up to you on what you want to put inside of your variables. If you wanted to create a font family or a main font variable, you could do that. So that stuff is all preference. I'm also going to zero out the margin and padding here. So zero that out. So now you can see the font's changed and all that. We'll also set a line height, which is again something that you could put in a variable if you wanted to. Okay, so now let's add the container class here, and the container is going to have a width, and I want that as a variable as well. So up here we're going to say dash dash container width, and we'll set that to, let's say, 90%. Okay, and then for the width we'll say var, and we'll put in container width 90%. We also want the margin for the container. I'm going to say 20 pixels top and bottom, and then auto left and right, which will push everything to the middle. Okay, everything in the container. The header doesn't have its own container, which we could do if we wanted to, but that's fine. All right, so let's deal with the header now. So we'll go down here and we'll say, what was it? Header with an ID of main header. Okay, and then I'm going to add a background color, and let's actually create a variable up here for that. So we'll say header dash bg color. Let's also we'll set that to 333, so it'll have a dark background. Let's also create a text color and make sure that that's light, so we'll do white for that. Okay, and then down here we can just say var, and we'll do header bg color, and then let's change the color of the text to var header text color and save, and now we have our black background. Now the space right here is from the H1, so what I'll do is I'll say header header main dash header, and let's set we'll just zero out the padding and the margin. What did I do? Oh, we need to put H1 here. Alright, so that gets rid of that space. So you can see we're doing more than just variables here. We're just creating a little layout. Okay, so now what I want to do is show you basically what I call scoped variables. I don't know if that's the correct term, but you can create variables on certain elements or certain scopes. So let's say we'll put a comment here. We'll say define box vars. Okay, so let's say dot box. So this is the element we want to define the variables for, and it not only applies to the box class, but anything within it. Okay, so let's add a box BG color, and we'll set that to, let's say, DDD, and then let's set a box main color, and we're going to set that to a blue hexadecimal, which is 06C. Okay, so now we have these two variables. Now these will not work anywhere else except for the box classes. Okay, if we define the box main color for the header, that's not going to work. So we could continue to do our box styling in here, but what I like to do is just keep this for the variables, and then we'll go ahead and create another box class for the actual styles. So let's say background color, and we'll set that to var dash dash box bg color and save, and now you'll see we have that gray background. Let's add another variable for padding. So for padding, I'm going to do 5 top and bottom, 10 left and right, and down here we'll go ahead and we'll say padding. We'll set that to box padding, and there we go. Now I want these to be side to side, so we're going to use a little bit of the grid system here. So we'll go up here and we'll say class grid, And let's go ahead and make sure we display a grid. Okay, and then we want to define our grid template columns. Now I do have a crash course on the grid CSS which explains all this stuff. Basically, template columns, we're just defining our layout. We could do pixels here. We could do like 100 pixels, 100 pixels. That would give us 2 columns, 100 pixels each. What I want to use is fractional units, so FRs. So we'll say 1 FR for the first box and 1 FR for the second, which will give us 2 even boxes here. All right, and if we want space in the middle, we can go ahead and we can say grid gap and set that to, let's say, 20 pixels. Gives us some space. And let's just align items to the center. All right, so we'll leave that for now. Let's go back down to the box. And I want to use this main color variable for a few things actually. So first thing is going to be the border. So we're going to say 1 pixel solid, and we're going to use our main color variable. So we can go ahead and say var dash dash box main color and save, and now we have that blue border. So the H1, I also want that to have that color, so we'll say box H1 down here and set the color to var box main color, save, and now it's blue. Now even if I were to get rid of this dot box and just have H1 and save, that's also going to be blue. And if I were to add an H1 somewhere else, we'll just say H1 test, you'll see that's not blue, because this is only going to work, this variable here, inside of the box class, even though we just used H1 here and we didn't even define dot box H1. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I'm just going to get rid of that. So I'm just going to put that dot box back there, but you don't actually need it to use the variable. All right, so the next thing I want to do is add some box shadow. Okay, so for box shadow we have a few different values that we need. One is the horizontal offset, which will be 10 pixels. The vertical offset will say 5 pixels. The blur, which will say 5 pixels, and then the color, which will use the main color here. So this. So we can go like that and save, and now you see we have that blue box shadow. Now with box shadow, we can't set individual properties for these values like we can, for instance, with a border. We could say like border color and set that to red. But with the box shadow, it all has to be in here. So having a variable for each one of these is kind of nice. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to set box shadow dash h dash offset, and we'll set that to what, 10 pixels. And then let's see, we'll just bring this down, and this one will be 5 pixels, and this will be the V offset. And then let's do what else, the blur. So we'll say shadow blur, and we'll set that to 5 pixels. So then down here we can just put in our variables. So I'll just grab that. This is the blur, so we'll say box what is it, shadow blur. Oh, nope, blur. And this one here will be the the V offset. So we'll say shadow V offset, and then this one will be the H offset. So H offset, and I'll just put these on separate lines because that's kind of hard to read. So we'll just go like that and save, and now we can simply change, for instance, the H offset. If we want to change that to 2 pixels and save, you can see that this side it's thinner. If we want to change the blur to, let's say, 25 and save, you see now we have a higher blur rate. I don't know if that's the right word, but you can see we can easily change the stuff from the shadow. All right, and I think that's a good use of CSS variables. Now, we're using this main color in quite a few places, so this is the benefit of using variables. If we were to change this to red and save, all of that stuff will change to red. So you can have an entire template where you have maybe a main or primary color, secondary color, maybe button colors, and you can easily just change those variable values and it'll update the whole look of your template, which is really nice. And that's one of the main reasons that Sass and Less were created. Okay, and now we can do that natively. Now, one thing that I want to show you real quick is, let's go up to the grid where we have the gap. Now, with Sass, we could put like a variable, like 20 inside of a variable, and then use that, and then put px and kind of concatenate it. We can't do that with custom properties. So if I were to set a variable here of gap to just 20, not 20 pixels, but just the number 20, and then go in here and say var -- gap and save, you'll see that there's no more gap. It doesn't work. So a fix for this is to use calc. Okay, we can use the calc function in CSS. So we'll say calc, we'll wrap this, and then what we can do is we can take this variable, which is actually 20, and we can say times 1 pixel and save, and then that'll give us 20 pixels. Okay, so that's a solution for that. Okay, we can also overwrite variables. So let's say for the paragraph in the box, let's say we wanted, say, color var, and set that to box main color, save, and now you can see the paragraphs are blue. Now we could overwrite this value right here, this box main color, for just the paragraph if we wanted to, by setting it here to, let's say, 555, which is a light gray. So if I save this, you'll see the paragraph text updates the color, but none of the other box main colors update, okay, because we overwrote it inside of the paragraph. Now another thing we have is a fallback option. So if we say color and we set that to a variable called, let's say, box-p-color, which doesn't exist, if I save that, it's just going to be black, which is the default. But we can say, we can put a comma here and add a parameter, which will be the fallback color. So for that, let's say 555, which is a light gray, and save, and now you can see that that's lighter. And if you can't really see the difference, let me just put in something even lighter, and you can see that that is now the fallback. All right, so we can do that. I think that's pretty much it as far as the basics go. So what I want to do now is jump into the HTML file and show you how you can access the variables in JavaScript. Okay, so we're just going to put some script tags in here, and what I want to do is I want to get the value for box main color, okay, which is this blue hexadecimal value 06C. So to do that, we're going to create a variable called box. I'm going to set it to document.querySelector, and it has a class of box. By the way, query selector is only going to select the first one. If you want to select all, then you would do query selector all, but that works in a different way. But we don't need that for what I'm going to do here. Now, I'm going to set another variable called box styles, and then set that to a function called getComputeStyle or getComputedStyle, and then pass in the box variable. Okay, and if we go ahead and we look at that with console log, so box styles, and save and open up our console with F12, you'll see it gives us all of these different styles. Now, what we want to do is we want to take this box styles, and we want to call a method called getPropertyValue, and then we can pass in the variable that we want to get. So let's actually get rid of this, and let's create a variable here. So we'll create a variable called box main color, and we'll set this to the box styles, and then we're going to say get property value, and then we can simply pass in the variable. So dash dash box dash main dash color, and then let's go ahead and console log that and save, and there it is, 06C. So we can get those variables in our JavaScript, which opens up a whole range of possibilities in terms of things we can do in the UI and with our templates. Now if we want to change a value, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the header and change the header BG color to the value that we got from the box main color. So I'll make it blue through JavaScript. So first of all, we want to grab the header. We'll use document.querySelector. And by the way, if you don't know about this kind of these selectors and the DOM and all that, check out my modern JavaScript course on Udemy. I'll put a link in the description. We go over all of this stuff. So from here, we want to select the main header. So it had an ID of main header. And then I'm simply going to take the header and just change the style and say .set property. So header.style.set property, and then in here pass in the variable we want to change or set, which is header dash bg dash color, which we defined as black, or not black, which where is it? Right here, almost black, dark gray. And what we'll do is put in a second parameter of what we want to change it to, which will be box main color, which is what we got up here. So if I save that, now you can see the header is blue. Okay, so we can get and we can set variables, CSS variables from JavaScript. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed this. I know, I could have just did a 3-minute video showing you how to define a variable, but I like to go, somewhat in depth so that you can wrap your head around it and get a better understanding of it. So hopefully you can appreciate that and not just say, wow, this guy takes friggin' forever to explain something. Yeah, so that's it. I hope everyone had a happy holiday and has a happy new year. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time. Coding Dojo is a programming school that turns beginners into developers in only 14 weeks. If you're serious about landing a career in tech but lack the formal education or background, Coding Dojo will get you there in no time. With over 3,000 graduates to date, over 90% of their grads land jobs within 3 months of graduating, often making over $70K per year at tech firms of all sizes, from companies like Google to local startups. To learn more, visit codingdojo.com or click the link in the description below.